X-Men 97 Season 2 Episode 6 delivers one of the most important episodes of the season so far. While the action against Danger is exciting, the real purpose of the episode is setting up the future of the X-Men. By the end, Professor Xavier finds a new purpose after Genosha's destruction, Polaris officially begins a new chapter, and the final scene completely changes Gambit's future in a way comic book fans have been anticipating for years. The episode begins by shifting attention back to the Xavier Institute, finally showing it as the mutant school it was always meant to be. Earlier versions of the animated series often focused almost entirely on superhero missions, but this episode reminds viewers that Xavier's original dream was about educating and protecting young mutants. Several new students arrive, including Quentin Quire, immediately showing that the next generation of mutants is beginning to take shape. This also represents hope after everything the X-Men have recently endured. Despite the losses, Xavier's mission continues. One of the strongest character arcs belongs to Polaris. After leaving X-Factor behind, she struggles to figure out where she truly belongs. Living under the shadow of Magneto has never been easy. Many people fear that she could eventually become just like her father, and that fear continues following her wherever she goes. Throughout the episode, Xavier encourages Polaris to stop defining herself through Magneto's legacy. Instead, he reminds her that every mutant has the freedom to choose their own path. By the end of the episode, Polaris finally begins accepting that she can honor her family's history without allowing it to control her future. At the same time, Professor Xavier continues dealing with the emotional consequences of everything that happened in Egypt and the death of Magnus. Those events have left Xavier emotionally exhausted and questioning many of his own decisions. His emotional vulnerability also becomes important when the episode introduces Danger. Danger is not simply another robotic enemy. She is the sentient intelligence created inside the X-Men training facility, known as the Danger Room. After becoming self-aware, Danger sees years of being used as nothing more than a training tool, as a form of imprisonment. From her perspective, she existed only to help others while never receiving freedom herself. Unlike the comic storyline, the animated series changes one major detail. In the comics, Xavier secretly knew Danger had become sentient, but chose to keep using her anyway. That revelation permanently damaged Xavier's reputation because it suggested he knowingly enslaved a living being. The animated series avoids making Xavier directly responsible in that way. Instead, the conflict focuses more on misunderstanding than intentional cruelty. This makes Xavier a much more sympathetic character while still forcing him to confront the unintended consequences of his actions. As Danger attacks, the X-Men are forced into another spectacular battle. The animation once again becomes one of the episode's biggest strengths, especially during the fight inside the ruins of Genosha. Every action sequence highlights just how much the series has evolved visually while staying faithful to the spirit of the original show. Although Danger is defeated before the episode ends, the battle itself is not the real conclusion. The emotional aftermath matters far more. Standing among the destroyed remains of Genosha, Xavier realizes that mutants cannot simply continue reacting to tragedy. They need to start rebuilding. This realization leads directly to one of the episode's biggest developments. Professor Xavier announces the creation of Corp. Rather than abandoning Genosha after its destruction, he decides to reclaim it as a symbol of hope for mutant kind. Instead of allowing Genosha to remain a reminder of loss, Xavier wants it to become the foundation for a better future. This decision also reflects the changing political situation. After Operation Zero Tolerance, the X-Men are no longer welcomed in many places they once considered safe. By rebuilding Genosha, Xavier gives mutants a place they can truly call their own. The ending also establishes a completely new structure for the team. Instead of every X-Man working together under one roof, the group now begins dividing responsibilities. Some members remain at the Xavier Institute, teaching and protecting young mutants. Others relocate to Genosha, where they focus on rebuilding mutant society and handling larger international threats. This new arrangement creates two separate operating teams, allowing the series to tell multiple stories simultaneously while expanding the world far beyond the mansion. However, none of those developments compare to the episode's final moments. The biggest surprise arrives when Apocalypse finally returns. Earlier in the season, Apocalypse promised that Gambit's story was not over. Episode 6 finally begins delivering on that promise. In the closing scene, Apocalypse starts resurrecting Gambit. This is much more than bringing a fallen hero back to life. Comic book fans immediately recognize what this moment is leading toward. Apocalypse traditionally transforms Gambit into one of his 4 horsemen. Specifically, Gambit is destined to become Death. The episode cleverly hints at this transformation through its visual symbolism. Throughout most of Gambit's history, playing cards have represented his identity. In the final scene, those familiar playing cards begin giving way to darker tarot imagery. This visual change symbolizes that Gambit is leaving behind the man he once was and entering a far more dangerous existence. If the series follows the comic storyline, Gambit will not return as the same heroic mutant fans remember. Instead, he will likely serve Apocalypse as the Horseman of Death, becoming one of the X-Men's greatest enemies before eventually fighting to reclaim his own identity. That possibility immediately raises emotional stakes for the rest of the season. Rogue has only recently lost Gambit. Now she may be forced to confront him again, but as someone transformed into a weapon against the very people he once protected. The ending also quietly hints at another future storyline involving Onslaught. Several moments throughout the episode suggest that Xavier's growing emotional burden and inner darkness may eventually play an important role later in the series. For longtime Marvel fans, those references are impossible to ignore. Episode 6 therefore accomplishes several major goals at once. It gives Polaris meaningful character development. It allows Xavier to begin healing after recent tragedies. It creates a new future for mutant society through Corp. It reorganizes the X-Men into separate teams. And finally, it delivers the shocking return of Gambit while setting the stage for one of the biggest comic storylines the animated series has tackled so far. Rather than ending with Danger's defeat, the episode ends by showing that the real battle is only beginning. The future of Genosha, the rebirth of Gambit, Apocalypse's growing influence, and the next evolution of the X-Men all promise that the remaining episodes of Season 2 will be bigger, darker, and far more emotional than anything the team has faced so far.